Today we're featuring a 1967 Bronco that Ironhorse Classics has actually rebuilt. Brandon has put the last 2 years of his heart and soul into this, so let's check it out.
Before that, make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate it. So what we have here is a 1967 Ford Bronco. Now that was the second year of these being produced, and there were a lot of unique characteristics of the 66 and the 67. Now the owner, when he brought this in, he really wanted to keep it original. And what we had was a very true, unadulterated example to start with. Uncut, no power steering, no power brakes. While it did have the optional 289 200 horsepower engine, otherwise it was option free.
Yes.
So going through it over the past year and a half, it fully removed it off the chassis, full body work. Now it was important to preserve as much as we could. So the body was repaired, but all the panels that you see are original. While it was off the frame, it did get a power brake, disc brake upgrade on the front, as well as the engine got rebuilt. We added a power steering, full exhaust.
Full exhaust. We chromed out the bumpers instead of a paint to match bumper. We added a few custom elements that we like to see on the vehicle to make it a little sharper. So, I mean, if you want, let's look under the hood and see what we've got.
Absolutely. So as mentioned, this did come factory equipped with the optional 289 200 horsepower V8. That is the original engine that came with the vehicle. It's still running the factory exhaust manifolds, trying to keep that period look. You'll notice that it's even got the original oil bath air cleaner. These were a technology that had been borrowed from previous cars, but because of the Bronco engine sitting so high to allow more ground clearance, they couldn't fit a normal air cleaner up here and clearance the hood. So this elongated oil bath air cleaner was used.
A lot of detail put underneath this engine bay. The oil bath cooler that you just spoke of, I know it came from the 20s and 30s. That technology is so dated and old, and it's interesting that they would put this in a 1967 automobile. The other details, I mean, if you look at your stock exhaust like you talked about, you look at the detail on the engine paint and just cleaning up the engine bay compared to where we started to what we have today is leap years ahead of where it was. So is there anything else you want to show us underneath the hood here?
I'd like to point out the power vacuum assist brake system that's been installed. It does provide ample stopping now to disc brakes on the front. We also have a power steering pump that's been added and a new reservoir, so that allows the driver to operate this in a very safe manner given today's traffic.
Wow, that's an interesting thing, because you know the U in the Bronco VIN number actually means utility. These were utility vehicles. Power steering was not a thing. I think the earliest power steering Bronco was in 1972. May be wrong there, but I believe that is the first year of power steering. Disc brakes, again, these are added features that only improve the drivability, the ride quality of the vehicle. If we want, we can put the hood down and let's go check the inside of this thing out. By the way, Brandon, the KC lights on the front are an excellent touch. Even though it's not a factory install, it is very historical, especially for us older guys. That'd be
Yeah,
neat.
I felt like it really provided that retro vibe that I think the owner really wanted to get with this one.
Pretty cool. Let's take a look inside. Man, what did we do to this interior? Because I know that's not stock.
So these are your original bucket seats from the Ford Bronco, but they've all been recovered using a leather and a kind of exaggerated houndstooth pattern, which I think is absolutely stunning. That theme continues on through to the back seat as well.
You got a little smoke glass going on there, so that just takes a little bit of the temperature away.
Yeah,
and
with
the
these
reflection.
Texas summers, it's very important that we keep these as cool as we can. Believe it or not, no AC. And we didn't add one, so that to keep it as cool as possible, we did go with that slight smoke glass.
Great.
So from the factory, these were never intended to go more than 55 miles an hour. If you recall, that was the speed limit on the interstates at the time. Obviously, fast forward to today, people are wanting to run on the freeway at 70, 75, maybe more here in Dallas.
Maybe.
So it's important that we added the safety cage because these were known to be top heavy and at high speeds can tip over. So that was definitely a custom touch here added at Ironhorse Classics.
That dash, when you sit in this vehicle, is absolutely amazing. All of the detail work, the stainless steel finishing screws, the horn button, all of these things, and I've noticed you put a little smaller diameter steering wheel on this. That sets this thing off, especially with the power steering. You don't need that big, bulky steering wheel that hits your knees every time you drive the vehicle.
Absolutely.
That was genius.
With the power steering, the advent of this OEM look but slightly smaller diameter is a real key. It's going to make it a lot more comfortable for the driver. It's not going to hit his knees when he's in the car. We've also added a seat rail option that slides back and gives the driver an extra 4 inches of legroom.
Fantastic. I noticed there's trim done, there's carpet. Did they do carpet in these things?
These were not typically optioned with carpet. Later versions, yes, but not.
So utility vehicle, I think that's what we keep coming back to.
Absolutely. They just had a rubber mat typically.
Yeah.
It was really important for us to maintain the original look as close as we could, but we did want to add some options. So a 67 Bronco didn't have power wipers. They had a vacuum actuated system that you reached overhead to turn on.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was using a factory button, but reallocating that so that it works on the wipers. But from the outside, no one would ever notice the difference. We also added a Dakota Digital Gauge.
RTX.
The RTX,
Yeah.
which adds a digital element to the dash, making it a lot easier to read.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever sat in an old Bronco knows how hard it was to read the gauge cluster being down here in your corner, kind of behind your hand while you're steering.
Yeah, it's lit up with LED lights. It also has a small LCD screen, so it's technology driven, but with a purpose.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we've also added a custom headliner. Now, Ford only provided a white, kind of waxed cardboard headliner in these Broncos. This one is fully padded and upholstered using a black leather-like vinyl.
Yeah, yep.
Very good for the climate. It's not going to degrade over time or have the extra weight
Yeah,
to make
yeah.
it sag.
Well, the coolest thing on this Bronco is something that I'm familiar with, and those are one-off hubcaps right there. Those hubcaps are 1967 only hubcaps. What's great about them is they are the original hubcaps. They're not reproduction. And our paint staff actually hand painted every one of those little black outlines.
Yeah, all those details.
Incredible.
Are
The
great.
detail work is phenomenal. It did take us a while to source all of the red rings, but we all pulled it together because they didn't come to us perfect or polished. They came to us with a lot of dents, and the guy stepped up and actually took them home over several weekends and hammered out the dents. They did a fabulous job there.
Absolutely. And then again, it goes to speak to the level of preservation that we attempted. If we could preserve it,
Yeah.
we absolutely did. One of the key notes you'll notice on this Bronco is that it sits low and it's uncut. All the Broncos, all the way through 77, came out of the factory with this look. All the other Broncos after that have been either lifted and cut to run a larger tire. What we're running here is a 31 by 10.5, which is the absolute maximum you can get away with
Yes.
whenever you leave it unlifted and uncut.
Yes, we had to do a little trickery because the rims on here are actually the original rims to the vehicle along with the hubcaps. We made a decision not to change them to a aftermarket rim or an aluminum rim. We wanted to preserve and keep the style of the stock Bronco, and you absolutely nailed it. Absolutely. Well, let's take a look at the back and see what you got there.
A few notes about the back. Now, while we didn't do anything custom or crazy, we definitely want to point out a few neat features. So obviously, it's got new weather strips, help everything seal up nice and shut tightly. This particular tailgate actually needed a lot of repair work, but we wanted to preserve the original one because the stamping. Only 66 and 67 had this specific line detail in it.
Yeah.
So while that was salvaged, some of the other work down here had to get redone. But again, when you're buying the reproduction, you're not going to get that detail or the Ford stamping in there, since that's a license.
The factory Ford stamping is really critical. The chime line does make a lot of sense there, but man, this right here, I've worked on a lot of Broncos. This thing shuts amazingly well. It is unlike any of the other Broncos that we've had the opportunity to work on. We've actually tried to replicate this and how this functions, and it's a lot of work. That attests to how well preserved this 67 Bronco was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To continue around, we can focus a little bit on the door over here. So inside, 67 had very unique one-year only door handles and window levers. Even other Bronco owners would be shocked to see that that's how the orientation was. Again, we've got the roll cage. Now, a custom touch that we've added here was a lot of guys who run the roll cage lose the ability to use the factory glove box. But because we wanted, again, to preserve that factory look, this one has been modified so that it slides slightly and then opens all the way up.
Wow.
And now we've got our fuse box in there. We did run a completely new wire harness throughout the entire vehicle, and that brings modern convenience of blade fuses and puts them in the glove box. One thing you'll notice that isn't an original Bronco item is a plaque that has been placed above the rearview mirror. Now that's a special piece made on request. The owner of this vehicle, his son owned this previously and is no longer with us. So it was important that we add something to the Bronco as a memorial to his legacy. Something that was important to him, he was an avid fly fisherman, and so we've added that detail for the family, and we'll see that on the inside.
Brandon, amazing job. I've never seen a Bronco door shut that smoothly, and the lines on the doors are almost flawless. We did not do a tremendous amount of prep work to create the lines. It actually came to us this way. I tell you what, the next steps we have is let's go for a drive and figure out how awesome this thing drives and how great it sounds.
Sounds great, too.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So here we are inside the Bronco. Let's start it up and go for a drive. So if you'll notice, that's 3 on the tree shifting, manual transmission, 3-speed, which all the Broncos came with at the time. The automatic wasn't offered until I think 73 or around that era. So the Bronco's got a little bit of a growl to it. We didn't want to go over the top with the exhaust. We are running more of a factory style exhaust, although that muffler is opened up just enough to give you a little bit of growl. So this Bronco got a restoration treatment, including a lot of new parts. That said, they're all still OEM spec. So you'll notice the Bronco, despite the restoration, it still rides a little rough. It is still a truck. The Bronco is basically run on leaf springs in the back, coil springs in the front. We did add new springs as part of this build, but again, leaving them the OEM spec. But I will say that this Bronco drives and rides incredibly nice for a Bronco. You'll notice it's relatively quiet inside. You might think that's funny, but I've been in some Broncos and they really squeak and rattle a lot. This one is pretty quiet comparatively. The Dakota Digital is great because it adds a little bit of modern touch to the otherwise vintage classic look. It adds more visibility with an actual digital readout of your miles per hour, but also better gauge illumination, layout, and it adds a tachometer, which the original Bronco didn't come with standard. So in building this roll cage, we had to keep in mind that our client is a taller individual. So it was really important that we allow enough headroom for lateral and forward movement, getting in and out, as well as adjusting in the seat. It's important that the structure itself is oriented in such a way to provide a grip, but also allow for that head clearance. And to touch back on the memorial plaque here, so James, one of our painters at Ironhorse Classics, was tasked with airbrushing a fly fisherman in this scene. I think he did a fantastic job. I know that from the owner's standpoint, they were very moved by that piece, and I'm glad that we were able as a company to provide something that makes it a little bit more personal to them. As originally set up, this Bronco retains its 3-on-the-tree transmission. It's a 3-speed synchro transmission that's actuated through a lever on the column. Additionally, you've got a 2-speed Dana 20 transfer case for 4-wheel drive. Typically, we're going to have it in 2-wheel high, but it gives you the ability to run 4-wheel high or 2-wheel low or 4-wheel low. Yeah. Some of the neat details that we have here inside, as we mentioned, the OEM style steering wheel, but being a smaller diameter, really makes it more comfortable. The older cars that lacked power steering usually gave the driver a larger steering wheel so they had more turning leverage. But with the power steering added, you don't need such. Most of the Broncos that get restored have an aftermarket style steering wheel, but I really am happy that we chose to go with a more factory look. It's got the original style rim blow horn. When it comes to the knobs, we wanted again to maintain a very factory look with the dash. But that said, we've added the KC lights, we've added electric wipers, and we wanted to be able to add those without having to go with an aftermarket switch. So we actually repurposed some original switches that control those features. So from the outside looking in, you would never know that it wasn't stock. So this is going to be your normal headlight, but underneath it, another one that specifies lights is for the KC driving lights. We've got the factory radio. It is unfortunately non-functioning, but it was important that we maintain that element. Over here, there's a push button for the washers. And the wipers here, later models of the Bronco did offer wipers, but this one would have had a vacuum actuated unit up here that would have had its own switch to open the vacuum line and create the motion. So in restoring the 67, we noted that there are several things that are 67 specific. The outdoor rear view mirror was unique for this year. Now, it was used on several other Ford models, but as far as Broncos go, that rectangular pattern was unique for this one year. The window crank and the door lever are also unique for 67. In restoring the windows, we have all new weather strip as well as the tinted glass. So it involved us having to deconstruct the doors completely so that we could then refurbish all the tracks and then reglaze and set the tinted glass inside. But when you look at a lot of restorations, you can look at those fine details and see that they didn't go to that level of adding new rubber and weather strip around all the windows. You know, at Ironhorse Classics, we're really honored and privileged to be able to work on projects similar to this Bronco, where a family brings it in and you know, they don't necessarily know where it's going to go. They have ideas, and we work with them to kind of create you know, ultimately what their dream is. And for this instance, it was to memorialize their son. So, you know, we kind of looked at what he had envisioned for it when he owned it. And I think that was to really stay true to how it was originally designed and not make like a big monster tire off-road version of the Bronco. Again, we're just truly honored that the family trusted us to go through this journey with them, and it's great to see that, you know, they're pleased with the results. A full restoration like this takes a lot of time. I think it's been at our shop for about 2.5 years. I personally have been working on it for almost a year, just in the assembly phase.
Well guys, we're wrapping this Bronco up, and thanks for your time today. If you could please leave us some comments, we would love to hear from you, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you again, guys.